For generations, people around the world have wondered how a young man from Hong Kong grew into one of the most influential martial artists in modern history. Bruce Lee's speed was shocking, his strength unbelievable for his size, and his ideas far ahead of their era. But behind the famous movies, behind the mesmerizing demonstrations, behind the legendary one-inch punch, there existed a hidden chapter of his life. A chapter so private that even many close to him rarely spoke of it. This was the period of Bruce Lee's most intense and dangerous training. To understand how this secret journey began, we must go back to Lee's youth, long before Hollywood fame or the creation of Jeet Kune Do. As a teenager in Hong Kong, he was energetic, gifted, but often rebellious. He studied Wing Chun under the iconic Ip Man, but his lessons were frequently interrupted by street fights and personal battles that demanded his attention. So when Lee sailed for America in 1959, few realized he was leaving with more than knowledge. He carried an obsession. He wanted to uncover the deepest truth of combat and to shape himself into someone who could withstand any challenge life threw at him. In Seattle, while working small jobs to survive, Lee trained with an intensity that shocked the handful of students who watched him. Because he lacked proper training tools, he crafted his own heavy sandbags, wooden boards, iron pipes salvaged from old buildings. He filled notebooks with ideas, sketches, measurements, and thoughts. These were the early seeds of a system that did not respect the limits of traditional martial arts. In one of those early notes, he wrote a line that would guide his entire life. "The human body can go far beyond what we allow it to." His students remembered how he would repeat the same strike for hours until his knuckles tore open. He believed that a fighter should be able to unleash power instantly, without warning, without stiffness, and without fear. To sharpen this skill, he practiced sudden movement drills, going from total stillness to full explosion in a heartbeat. It wasn't just training his muscles, it was rewiring his entire nervous system. But the real breakpoint in his evolution came later, after Bruce moved to Oakland. Away from public eyes, he began pushing himself into extreme mental and physical territories. He became fascinated with what he called the moment between two breaths. That split second where instinct takes over from conscious thought. To train this instinct, he worked in near darkness. He hung ropes, bottles, and small targets around him, then practiced striking and dodging almost entirely by feel. He wanted his body to react even when his eyes couldn't guide him. Neighbors often complained about strange cracking sounds late at night, unaware that he was practicing what he called the zero-distance strike. This was the raw, harsh ancestor of the one-inch punch. Boards and bricks were pressed against walls so they barely moved, forcing Lee to generate massive power without space. With every strike, he delivered shock waves through his bones. He trained until sweat soaked the floor and his arms went numb, and then he continued. The most hidden part of this chapter began after a controversial fight in Oakland forced him to defend his right to teach martial arts to anyone, regardless of ethnicity. Although he won, the fight didn't satisfy him. He felt he should have performed better. That disappointment lit a fire in him that would change everything. He withdrew from friends, distanced himself from distractions, and pushed himself into the most demanding transformation of his life. He devoured knowledge from every corner: fencing manuals, boxing techniques, studies on human biomechanics, Muhammad Ali's footwork, psychology journals on fear and stress. But the real transformation happened when he trained alone. One of his practices focused on what he described as kinetic harmony, the perfect link between every part of the body during a strike. He wrapped resistance bands around his waist and limbs and practiced movements that punished the slightest mistake. If he was not perfectly aligned, the bands violently snapped him off balance. This harsh training carved a level of precision into his strikes that later became world famous. His pain tolerance training was even more extreme. He believed a true martial artist must remain sharp, even when exhausted or injured. So he sprinted uphill with weights, sometimes until he nearly collapsed, then forced himself to throw flawless strikes afterward. He conditioned his hands by plunging them into buckets filled first with sand, then gravel, then metal pellets. He kicked hanging logs not to swing them, but to stop them dead in their path, absorbing the recoil through perfect structure. These exercises were not theatrics. They were the foundation of his physical durability. But perhaps the most important part of his deadliest training had nothing to do with muscle. It came from the mind. Lee spent long stretches in deep mental discipline, practicing meditation not to relax, but to sharpen his awareness. He visualized every possible scenario, being ambushed, being outnumbered, being knocked down. His aim was to eliminate hesitation, fear, and emotional noise. He trained himself to think clearly under pressure, to act automatically when danger appeared. Years later, when students asked how he stayed calm during threats, he answered simply, "Because I have practiced chaos." By the end of the 1960s, his abilities had become almost unbelievable to those who witnessed them. His punches moved so fast that cameras struggled to capture them clearly. His kicks struck with a sound that rattled metal bags. His grip was so strong that he could lift heavy plates with just 2 fingers, an act few athletes his size could replicate. And yet, beneath all this physical power, there still lived the same philosophy: strip away everything unnecessary. Keep only what is useful. Seek truth, not tradition. And above all, remain honest with yourself. Deep in his journals, during this era of isolation and transformation, Lee wrote a line that showed what truly drove him. To master deadly skill, one must first understand life, because death is only its shadow. Bruce Lee wasn't training to become violent. He was searching for human potential, how far a person could push themselves when they refused to accept limits. His deadliest training was not about defeating others. It was about defeating his own weaknesses. It was about confronting fear, challenging habits, and reshaping his identity from the inside out. When fame finally arrived, when crowds admired him and students mimicked his moves, very few understood what he had gone through. They didn't see the lonely nights, the physical suffering, the frustration, or the countless failures behind the scenes. They didn't see the man who poured everything he had into becoming better than he was yesterday. They saw the legend, but not the work that built it. In truth, Bruce Lee's deadliest training tells the story of a man who refused mediocrity. A man who refused to be limited by culture, tradition, or expectation. A man who pushed his mind and body into places most people would never dare to go. His greatest powers were not born on movie sets, but in quiet rooms where there was no applause, only sweat, struggle, and relentless discipline. And even though much of this chapter remained hidden, its impact echoed through the world. Every punch he threw on screen, every line he spoke, every philosophy he shared came from this intense and personal journey. Through this unseen struggle, he transformed from a gifted martial artist into an icon of human possibility. This is the untold story of Bruce Lee's deadliest training, a journey of body, mind, and spirit that shaped him into someone the world continues to admire decades after his passing.